हाँ जी, तो जिस तरह आपसे हमने वादा किया था कि अब जो है वो गुफ्तगू का सिलसिला शुरू करेंगे, तो इस वक्त पाकिस्तान वुमेन टीम के हेड कोच डेविड हेम्प हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं। फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, वेलकम टू गेम सेट मैच, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
David, you'd be satisfied with the performance these girls have given at home versus Sri Lanka, but not satisfied with the performance they gave in the World Cup?
Yeah, look, I think if we start with the Sri Lanka series, obviously to win the series 3-0 in the T20 and then 2-1 in the one-days was for us exciting because we had lots of different contributions from different people. You know, if you look at from a batting point of view, the first opening partnership record was broken. The second wicket record was broken as well. Sidra Amin scoring 100. Tuba Hassan, best figures on debut in the T20. Gunnar Fatma, personal best in the ODI with 4 for 26. So there was lots of positives went through that series. Plus then on the back end, Anam Amin and Nida Dar rising up the rankings individually. So there's a lot of positives that came out of it. I guess I don't like to lose, so I mean it's disappointing thing was the last game. I think we didn't chase well enough, even though we were 4 down in the chase. I think 250 was gettable. I think the way the sort of chase petered out was a bit, something a little bit disappointing, but something we'll talk about. But overall, if you said we're going to win that series 5 games out of 6, we would have said, well, we'll take that. The World Cup, yeah, look, again, the reflections on that were some bits again I think showed some good resilience, but there were certainly two games that we lost as opposed to the opposition winning. I think that's the important thing for us to take from it is make
South African game.
South African game and the Bangladesh game, the two for me, we got into really strong positions and then we didn't see it through. And that we've got to get better at doing that because often we get into, even the India game to some extent where I think, stand corrected, I think it was 6 for 114 in the 33rd, 34th over. Yeah, they played well, the two players that came in and they changed the way they played in their approach. So you have to accept that, but we didn't react well enough, and arguably, that 236 should have been a less total to chase. So, look, I guess for me, it's more about are we getting into good positions, and then once we do, how do we make sure that we capitalise on that? So that's the bit that we've been sort of looking at.
So, David, what's being done about that? Because I mean, the matches that you mentioned, as you just mentioned yourself, that Pakistan, they had to go for the kill. We could not go for the kill, could not finish those matches off, especially against Bangladesh and South Africa. India, we know, is one of the best in the world. So the camp that is going on, the training that you've been imparting to the team, I believe it requires a lot of psychological training aspect, the psychological aspect of that thing. Where did you find us lacking in those matches? Was it the difference in the skill, which, well, we can argue, or was it all psychological?
Oh, look, I think it's a combination. I think in terms of the first part of the question of what are we addressing about, I'll talk in a minute. But in terms of those pressure situations, yeah, it's about how you handle it. I don't think for me it's not about the skill. I think our girls are skilled. I track it back down to being in those pressure situations as much as possible. So you're used to dealing with them, and then you can handle those moments when they come up. And ideally you're coming out 7, 8 times out of 10 on the positive as opposed to the negative. At the moment, we're coming out the other side of that. So how do we manage that? That's just about how you train, I think. And the whole point of the training exercise is you put yourself in game situations and you train at an intensity that marries and matches with the game. Because if you don't do that, then when you get to the game, you're going to go back to default. If your default's not playing under pressure, then you're not going to come out on top. So it's about creating challenging players in training, putting them under as much pressure as possible, so that when we get into the game situations, they're more likely to be able to come out on the right end of the result than the negative end. Yes, playing games and playing competitive games as often as possible also helps. But when you haven't got that, at the moment we're sort of tracking through that. In a few years' time, I think there will be a strong domestic system, and I think once you make that strong, then girls are constantly being put under pressure, not just at the national level, but underneath. Once that happens, then they'll get accustomed to playing under pressure, and that's all we're trying to achieve, is how do we excel under pressure. And if you look at the best players in the world, or the best teams in the world, they're able to react and adapt their games accordingly to the situation. So that's what we're talking about.
This is what I was about to ask you, that if we talk about the best teams in the world, you say Australia, England, like the White Ferns play, New Zealand plays. What was the major difference between Team Pakistan and all these teams when you came here, and how much have you achieved over the period of time? Like, do you think that the bar has gone up over the period of time now?
Yeah, look, I think personally within our group it has. I think we're physically fitter now. We move better in the field. We're running better between wickets. So we test the players every 30 to 40 days, so that they can't sort of get tested once a camp every 6 months. They're now getting regularly tested, so they can't drop off in terms of fitness. So when they're with us, great, we can manage them and we can set up S&C.
What was the difference, David? When you came here, what was the difference between Australia, England kind of teams and Pakistan?
Just training mentality, physically fitter. They both come from strong domestic systems, which helps. I mean, Australia, don't forget, this is where I think people forget that Australia, when I started working the state system there 2015, that's when they sort of changed shift and they started to then invest heavily in the domestic game in Australia. 2017 they didn't qualify, they got knocked out in the semis in the UK to India. And from a national point of view, that changed their mindset in terms of how they approach the game.
But David, early identification of a player, is that one key that we are missing? Early age identification that those countries do?
I don't think so. I just think it's having the system in place that allows those players to flourish. And I think that's what Australia did really well. Again, I go back to Victoria. When I was, we contracted 3 or 4 girls that were in school. So Sophie Molyneux, Georgia Wareham, Annabelle Sutherland, Taylor Valamic all came through that system at 17, 18-year-olds. So they were contracted really early to get them into the system early. And by the time they're 19, 20, or Annabelle's a bit earlier, but the time they're 19, 20, that they've all debuted and they're all playing, and they're all a regular part of that Australian side now. So it is about that early identification, but it's having a system whereby they can then learn and grow and be fast-tracked in a way. So look, that will happen with us at some stage. I still think we can manage that, and I still think but it's still, for us, what's important is when the girls are actually away from us, that they are training well within their regions. And it's great to see now that regions are up and running. It's great to see the number of 1,000 girls attending the trials that took place over a month ago. The regional areas are now working well with those girls. They're playing at least once a week, if not 2 games a week, plus 2 skill sessions a week. So you're going to see, for me, certainly with the next couple of years, lots of, not to say change, but certainly lots more players being available and players coming into contention.
And David, finally, lots of cricket coming for Pakistan women in very alien conditions. Like, we'll be traveling to Ireland, and in fact we'll be in the British Isles and then Australia. So how are we preparing for that? Because the tracks here, do you think they suffice for that sort of skill set that is required in these conditions? Yeah,
imagine Ireland, Ireland being raised in Wales, knowing that the west of the UK gets a lot of wet weather. So Ireland was no different to sort of South Wales, where I grew up. So yeah, the wickets might be a little bit slower than what we're used to in that part. I imagine, look, Edgbaston, obviously being a test ground, I'm sure the wicket there will be as we expect. I think they'll be as firm as possible and the ball should come onto the bat. Ireland might be a little bit slower, but in terms of what we're doing here, we've left a little bit of grass on these and a little bit slower, so that to try and assist with the players that way. So that's what we'll think about and talk about. But again, we have plenty of practice opportunities in Ireland and in the UK before the games actually start within the competition.
So David, good luck for the upcoming tours, and I hope Team Pakistan do pretty well under you.
That's great. Thanks very much. Thanks for your time. Thank you.